in this occasion of Muharram.
Right.
We'd like to know something about Muharram and what our brothers, the Shia, do in this month, and what is Hadhrat's opinion about that.
You see, Muharram al-Haram has a history much longer than related to Karbala. And according to Islam, Muharram is a very important month. And the very name Muharram indicates that there is a warning from Allah that you must behave and abstain from certain things, particularly crime. So I believe this name is indicative of a prophecy. Right from the beginning it was destined that Rasul's family will be closely treated. On this month, and I always look at Muharram as a destined month right from the beginning, in the knowledge of Allah it was, and so the appropriate name was given to this. And yet that warning was not taken. Yet the cruelty was perpetrated. This is unbelievable, unthinkable. And unfortunately, instead of getting the right message from this, some people got the wrong message. And the resultant sect in Islam, Shiaism, got its full impetus and strength from what happened during the Muharram, the 10th of Muharram particularly. So unfortunately, this sacrifice has not been properly understood. I believe that this was an indication that people had not shown that gratitude to Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam which was due to him. That was one very particular message. But there are other messages in this. As far as the representation of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is concerned, that is through Khilafat. And without Khilafat, whoever confronts the institution of Khilafat, he is to be taken individually. His relationship to anybody has no meaning. Now, that is understood, but it does not mean that the family of Hazrat Muhammad should have been treated like that. I'm not defending that at all. But if you go deeper into this, then some messages are drawn. But after the translation is done, then I'll return to the subject. You see, the message I read from that is that sometimes piety and righteousness is over-trusting. It becomes credulous. And those people who are innocent and pious, they don't read the mischief behind the intentions of others. So this is a very fit case to study right from the beginning as to what happened. People of Kufa kept sending messages to the progeny of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that you deserve to be the caliph after Hazrat Ali. You have every right, and your right has been usurped. So come and we'll support you. We'll rise with you, and we'll accept the Bayt al-Khilafah with you. Now this is a very critical decision to be made as to what should have been the reaction. The point which should be understood is that Muawiyah had already established a sovereignty, a rule, while Hazrat Ali remained Khalifa, and he did not fight it out with him and permitted him to remain in office of that sovereignty, as a ruler of the state.
Wilaya.
Huh?
Wilaya.
Yes. But he never accepted him as Khalifa, nor the Muslims as a whole should have accepted him as a Khalifa. So this is the most critical juncture of Islamic history, which people failed to understand, and with the result, so much confusion was born and so much cruelty was perpetrated. I will come to analyze this issue, then inshallah you will begin to see the light through the fog. Now, two Khilafat al-Rashida cannot simultaneously run. There is one unity of God under which Hazrat Muhammad is the center of the manifestations of Allah's unity in the world. He is Khalifatullah. Under him you can't have split Khilafat, it's impossible, unbelievable. So there was only one Khilafah, that was Hazrat Ali's, Radiyallahu anhu. And Muawiyah's Khilafat was only in name. But if you further analyze the Islamic concept of state and spiritual leadership, then you begin to see a few other things in this situation. Nowhere has Islam declared that there should be only one state in Islam. The state power can be divided. That is why the Holy Quran very clearly says that if you disagree with each other, different Muslim states come into conflict with each other, it is the responsibility of the United Ummah, United Nations-like concept is born, to unite their forces against the warring states, which are Muslim states. So if there was just one state, this ayah doesn't mean anything. So this ayah of the Holy Quran gives a very clear message that under Islam, the political unity under one head is not essential, nor is it possible. But spiritual unity under one head is possible. So Khalifa could remain Khalifatullah or Khalifatul Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and people living in the territory of Muawiyah could have paid homage to him and remain under his bay'ah. But it did not mean that unless a political revolution takes place, this Khilafat cannot extend the borders into the other states of Islam. Now, if this is not right, then this first doesn't mean anything. And if this is not right, then it means that all the Muslims were spreading in China, everywhere in the world, they had no Khilafat and no leadership. This is also wrong. So from this I infer that they could have directly accepted or should have directly accepted the spiritual leadership of Hazrat Muhammad successor, that is Hazrat Ali at that time, and remained in spiritual bay'ah to him. As far as the political sovereignty of power is concerned, that could have remained with Muawiyah or anybody else. When there was a disagreement on religious matters, then according to the Holy Quran, the matter should have been referred to Allah and the Quran. Muhammad Rasulullah, Allah and Muhammad Rasulullah. That is, Allah is represented by Quran and Muhammad Rasulullah is represented by his traditions, and it doesn't mean that everybody should directly ask Allah. It means that Allah has made himself manifestly clear in the Quran. So that should have been the ideal, perfect formula to work amicably during those periods of disturbances. The Quran was clear, the understanding failed. That was the unfortunate point. Bain al-Afrad or groups and Walaya on the other hand. And Hazrat Ali radiyallahu anhu was also Khalifa to all the Muslims which had converted to Islam during that period, even in China. The Chinese Muslims had started, taken root during that period. In India and elsewhere, Islam had already got introduced. So who was their Khalifa? Not Muawiyah. Muawiyah's rule ended where his borders ended. But Hazrat Ali's Khilafat was universal because he was the Khalifa of a universal prophet. So this is how it should have been understood. And the Holy Quran was very clear. So it was unfortunately mixed up with political rule. This issue was confused with political rule. And that is why when the members of Hadhrat Muhammad's family were invited, the people who had invited them, in fact, did not want to accept them as their spiritual leader only. They wanted to use their name, their authority, their standing with the people of Islam for their ulterior motives of rebellion against Muawiyah. That is what started all the debacle which followed. And this was the mistake committed on the part of those who sent this message. And as I told you, sometimes a pious holy man does not understand the intricacies of these conspirators. So that is what started all that was most unfortunate in the history of Islam. But also I remind you once again, as to understand the institution of Khilafat from the institution of Khalifatullah, not otherwise. Without fully understanding the institution of Khalifatullah, you cannot comprehend at all Khalifatul Rasul and his status and his position and his scope of action. Hazrat Muhammad was Khalifatullah even in Mecca, when he was a very small minority, and in no way did he wield any authority in Mecca or anywhere in the world. Was he not Khalifatullah?
Yes.
So being Khalifatullah does not depend on your holding political power at all. If this is Khalifatullah, then Khalifatul Rasul is no exception. Khalifatul Rasul is under him, and he takes his form and nature and character, he borrows his nature and character from Khilafatullah, is Allah's Khilafat. So that is how this matter should have been understood, and as you read the Quran, it's so clear. This is the history of Islam. So these things should not have happened. Hazrat Ali could have even extended his bayat to the areas commanded by Muawiyah. So alright, you follow him, because according to the Quran, whoever is in rule, in authority, you do not have a right to rebel against him. So once Hazrat Ali accepted his rule, after that no Muslim in his territory had a right to rebel against him. But they had a right to migrate and attack from outside if they did not agree with their rule. That is a different story. As long as they remained, the Holy Quran required them to follow this advice that Ati'ullaha wa Ati'ur Rasula wa ulil amri minkum. Here ulil amr is different from Ati'ullah wa Ati'ur Rasul. Khilafat cannot be different from Ati'ur Rasul, from the order of Ati'ur Rasul. How can you say it is Khilafah? Because if when tanazatum fi shayn farudduhu ila Allah wa Rasulih, not ila Khalifa, la ila Khalifa, which means positively that Allah does not mean here Khalifatul Rasul, because how can you believe Khalifatul Rasul to be at variance in any way with Rasul or with Allah? So here it is the worldly authority which is mentioned under Ulil Amri Minkum, not the spiritual authority. So what happened there? It was the fault of the people who rebelled against an established authority, against the order of the Quran. But what followed was utter cruelty. Those who committed crime, they were left unpunished, and those who were made dupes of their conspiracies, who were duped by these people, they were punished for the crime which was in fact committed by the people of Kufa. They should have punished and they should have been spared, because they moved in innocence, and anyway, their relationship with Rasulullah would not permit any Muslim to dare to treat them unkindly as they were treated. They could have been confined, no problem. Their rebellion was not that of that nature. They only asked for khilaf with the bay'ah, So the people of the authority could have taken the stance, all right, take bath and return. But as far as the political rule is concerned, our rule will continue. That was a simple problem. Over-exaggerated, and those people was hit at who had no crime to, who have committed no crime in fact in reality. While his subjects could have done bad at the hands of Hazrat Imam Hassan. You see, this is a very important thing. Even if you take more time to make them understand, it should be driven into their heads. And whoever became a Muslim in Medina or anywhere else, in Arabia or anywhere, they remained in his bay'ah, and his Khilafah extended all the political barriers. This is true Khalifatullah. And Khalifatul Rasul takes his identity from Khalifatullah, from nowhere else. Not everywhere. In some other places, some other people could have been the Sultan. Now, the second part is also in big confusion. This should be very clearly understood. After you understand the principles, then the matter becomes very clear. When Yazid invaded Kufa and thereabout, he was ordered to still the rebellion, to bring the rebellion down, crush the rebellion. But no rebellion took place there. The people of Kufa abandoned their honored guests, and nobody rose in arms. So he should have sent a message home that rebellion is already quelled, and there is no rebellion left at all. A spiritual bay'ah of Imam Hussain does not in any way interfere with the state, your state. So let them leave them alone. There is no interference in the state matters. But there are two things which were wrongly committed. He bore the burden or the brunt of the whole matter on the shoulders of the family of Hazrat Muhammad. And a small party of innocent people, they were surrounded and so cruelly murdered and ill-treated that seldom you see such cruelty perpetrated against anybody. And they were no match anyway, physically. What threat did they offer? No threat could have been caused to this great kingdom of Muawiyah and his followers, his children. That was just an imaginary threat which did not exist in reality. If they were left alone, nothing could have happened. They should have surrounded Kufa and remained there in their presence. If they raised their head, they were their subjects. They could have beaten them down, but should have left them alone. But then to require from them to do bay'at of Muawiyah, that is where they were wrong. They were not subject of Muawiyah, they were in fact foreign visitors from an outside territory. They should have been told to return home. That was the maximum which should have been done. Because they did not come to raise arms themselves. They did not raise arms. Arms were raised by them when they were attacked. So it is wrong to attribute rebellion to Hazrat Imam Hussain and his family. As I have told you, they were left high and dry, abandoned. And they should have been respectfully told, these people are, what should I say, the words are very strong which come to my mind. Leave them alone, they are meaningless people, they have ill-treated you, they have misled you and have nothing to do with them. Return to your home and remain the spiritual leader of the people around and lead them to piety. And then they should have returned, or remain in presence in the area, so that if anybody tries to make mischief, then he should be crushed. what right did they have to force them to do Bayat of Muawiyah? They had no right. Muawiyah, I mean, his son, Yazid, sorry. Yazid represented Muawiyah. But the general who represented Yazid, he is the main culprit in fact. Some people have defended Yazid to a degree. I don't think he is absolved of all responsibility. Although when the prisoners were presented to him, he is known to have treated them with some respect. But all was done with his command, and some Sunni historians have tried to absolve him of all the responsibility. I do not agree with them at all. It's impossible for his general to have, taken such drastic measures against the family of Rasulullah without his permission, without an understanding from him. So I don't defend his cause at all. But I agree that his instructions might have been over-exaggerated. I agree that his instructions should have been implemented when there is no more need for implementation of those instructions. If a punishment was should have been meted out, it should have been addressed to their own subjects who did this, because they didn't come with any intention of rebellion. He said, you are a spiritual leader, come to us and we'll do bad. That was all intention. So the next remaining episode is so sad, so tragic. It's difficult for me to discuss it. What happened was the greatest tragedy in the history of Islam after Hazrat Muhammad's period, when he was ill-treated. Of course, that was the greatest tragedy. But after that, this is the most unfortunate episode. So we should pray for the departed souls, we should highlight their character and strength in weakness, the manlyhood with which they stood their grounds and did not bow to an authority sacrificing their principles. This is the best homage that we can pay to their memory, and this is the lesson we should draw from this. But otherwise, as I have attempted, I think the confusion has to be sorted out and clarified. Not only for Makkah, but the whole world.
Oh yes.
That is the confusion. Politically,
yes.
It was not a confusion. It was not a political invasion made of Iraq. If had it been a political invasion, then he should have come with large army. It should be invaded like the kings invade other territories. That is what I want to clarify. It was not an invasion, political, territorial invasion of Iraq at all. They were misled to believe we want to do Bayat at your hand. All right, let's go. Now, another proof that they also understood this problem clearly is that if they thought it was an invasion of their territory, then they should have hit back at their territory that was controlled by Hazrat Ali. They should have invaded that territory, and Mecca and Medina should have been, completely laid low with their might. It was not like that. They destroyed them, and in fact with that, the spiritual leadership which was rising was unfortunately brought to an unfortunate, immature end. And that is why this confusion resulted in only one territorial reign. That was Muawiyah's reign afterwards. And Mecca and Medina, etc., and all the areas surrounding them, the mainland of Hijaz, etc., they also fell to the territory of the Syrian rule because of this mistake. Unfortunately, these are the lessons we should draw. The holy people should not be duped by, this is their right to rule spiritually, but this is also the responsibility to see through the game of the enemy and not to fall into the trap of the enemies. You see, this is a very big damage done to Khilafah Because after that, Khilafat al comes to an end. And the political power is also lost, and the spiritual power is also lost, and confusion is created. And a very big damage is done to Islam and its progress all over the world. You see, they should have drawn their lesson from Hazrat Ali radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Hazrat Ali was not only spiritually at very high status, but he was one of the wisest people at the time of Muhammad Rasulullah. He never jeopardized his spiritual Khilafat for the sake of some territory of Syria, etc. He didn't care. People, pressed him for invading them and come to fight and so on and so forth. He refused. Now some people think it was a mistake. I think it was the greatest act of his wisdom. He knew where the greatness of Khilafat lay. It lay not in territorial rule, but in the spiritual rule. So he happened to command both the territory of that area and also the spirits of all the Muslims, according to me, of the whole world. So he didn't dispute the issue of territorial occupation by Muawiyah or some others. Had he considered it to be a real threat to Khilafah, had he really believed that it was the Khilafah which was got split and his Khilafat is taken away, I doubt if Hazrat Ali should have stopped short of invading Muawiyah and punishing him. So he understood it to be a territorial thing. He said, under Islam, there can be territorial rules here and there. So Hadhrat Imam Hussain and the family were duped by the people of Iraq, and they should have followed the Sunnah of Hazrat Ali radhiyallahu ta'ala and should have understood. But as I say, to begin with, I believe that they did not invade. They were duped. But then war was imposed on them. But because they were duped to go into another territory, that was the mistake, only mistake I believe they committed, and Hazrat Ali would never have done that. I'm 100% certain. He would never have done that. The result, we paid dearly, the whole world of Islam paid dearly for this small mistake. You see, and then the conduct of Sunnah of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah also threw ample light on this issue. When Musaylama Kazzab approached Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah and wanted a division of his Khilafah between him and Muhammad Rasulullah. Imagine. No question. Whatever may happen. Not a jot, not a dot of Khilafah will be shared by anybody else. This is the true Khilafah. They should have drawn their lesson from that. That is why I say Hazrat Ali did not commit a single mistake. Absolutely right, because he understood Hazrat Muhammad better than anybody else in the world. He understood the meaning of being Khalifatullah. And because he was his Khalifa, he knew his position. Muawiyah could not take a jot of his Khilafah by ruling a territory. Because the whole world was ruled by other kings. And their rule could not take a jot of his Khilafah. So how could Muawiyah's rule in the territory in any way deprive him of his supreme position in Islam as Khalifatul? So that is what the confusion of the time, unfortunately deprived people of the period to understand. Things were confused. Now we look back, in the backlight we see history very clear. But when you're involved in a game, then you don't see that clearly. So it's no fault of theirs either, in fact. Unfortunate times, unfortunate fogs of the situation. That did not permit them to see clearly. I give you an example. When you are watching a football match from outside, even if you don't know how to kick, you say, oh, what a mistake he has committed, He should have this. You see all the mistakes being committed by the champions of the game. And even the greatest champion he committed, you see, he made a mistake. and in tennis and everything. And if you tell him to come into the field, he can't even kick. So that is how it happens with historians. Historians are people of the later period, like we are, looking back. It's not a great credit to us that we say, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. When you're involved and the pressure of the events is upon you, then your vision is befogged. You can't see that clearly as we can now. So that is why you should say ultimately, last thing, he is to be blamed, he is to be blamed. Let's leave that to God and say Allah is the best judge, but what happened was very tragic. Most tragic, it shouldn't have happened. Allah bless the souls of the martyrs. And salam and durood on the Ala Muhammad Sallallahu and those who were martyred. Assalamu alaikum, jazakumullah. Thank you for raising this very important issue, appropriate for this period.
For the first time I understood.
Alhamdulillah.